Hello. Welcome back for the third installment of the first read of Esquire magazine's interview of Tarantino, DiCaprio, and Pitt. That, of course, is Quentin Tarantino, Leonardo DiCaprio, and Brad Pitt after they wrapped the movie 2 years ago now, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The title of the article is Quentin Tarantino, Brad Pitt, and Leonardo DiCaprio take you inside Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The interviewer is Michael Haney, and the photographs are by Alexei Lubomirsky. And the photograph of the three, DiCaprio, Quentin, and Brad, in front of the orange vintage car is the last one shown here. All of them have been shown throughout the three parts. This is the last one of Alexei Lubomirsky's, and then I found a few more, some more I should say, from Google Images, and those should be shown here on this one. I believe that this is the final episode. We'll see if I'm right. And here we go. Subtitle, The Long View. Michael Haney. Speaking of the 90s, as we said, you guys all popped at the same time. And what's interesting is, yes, the business is always evolving, but what courses through the streets of Hollywood is eternal. The insecurities, the neuroses, whether it is 1919 or 2019, that never changes. Again, you all have 25 years of winning the lottery. So I'm curious, are there other things that remind you of where you are right now in your own careers? Leo DiCaprio. I've been listening to podcasts about the history of Hollywood, the transition from silent movies to talkies, the advent of television, the musicals in the 60s, the director's era of the 70s, and now we're talking about streaming services. I don't want to act as if I've been around since effing silent cinema, but I see this as a huge shift in the way movies are going to get done. What gets financing? The studio system has tons of content, libraries of things that they can make movies of, but in a lot of ways, they are hemorrhaging. They've become much like in the 20s, these corporate empires that have taken over the artistic vein of movie making. We're now in an era when there's a flush of cash into streaming, but with an overflow of content. There's a lot of garbage out there. Now, I do see a lot of chances being taken for storylines, certainly documentaries, certainly giving some artists opportunities to make out-of-the-box storylines that I don't think 10 years ago would have been possible. But these types of films that Quentin is doing are also becoming endangered species. Brad Pitt, no question. Leonardo DiCaprio. I'm not saying celebrate this movie, but let's celebrate filmmakers who are still holding on to the craft of making movies. And let's hope that in that transition into whatever this is going to be, this type of filmmaking will still exist. There are some dark ages coming up. Brad Pitt. The positive of the new landscape is you see more people getting opportunities. But I see something else happening with the younger generations. I was dismayed at how many 20-year-olds have never seen Godfather. Cuckoo's Nest, All the President's Men. These films that are in the Bible to me, and they may not even get to see them. I've always believed every good film finds its eyes inevitably, but there's a shift in attention span. I've been hearing from newer generations that they're used to something shorter, quicker, big jump, and get out. And the streaming services work that way. You can move on to the next one if you're enticed. What I always loved about going to a cinema was letting something slowly unfold and to luxuriate in that story and watch and see where it's going. I'm curious to see if that whole form of movie watching is just out the window with the younger generations. I don't think so completely. Quentin T. It requires the right kind of movie, one that hits the right kind of nerve, where it becomes a conversation. Get Out achieved that. Everyone was talking about it, and the whole metaphor of the sunken place was something everyone started to use. It sparked genuine conversation. It used to be movies were the pop culture conversation, and it was much rarer for a TV show to break into that place. But now, that's where it is. Michael Haney, Brad and Leo, you play these guys who are in the middle of their careers, and you're in the middle of your careers and your lives. Brad Pitt, the middle. You're being generous. He laughs. Michael Haney, when you look back at the beginning of your careers, how do you think you are different from when you broke into Hollywood? Leo DiCaprio, the first years are seminal. At that point, it just becomes about opportunity. And in a weird way, I really connect with myself as a young man trying to get into the industry. Growing up in LA, in Silver Lake, was the only reason I became an actor. Had I lived anywhere else, my parents would not have box parents, laughs, and box parent. Picked up shop and moved. It was the sheer proximity to auditions. But once I got my foothold and I got that one movie, I said, quote, I'm doing movies now. I've been doing television and here's my shot, period, end quote. Any young actor I've ever spoken to, I say, quote, the first thing you gotta do is learn as much as you possibly can about the history of what the fuck has been done in the industry, period, end quote. If you're coming here and want your shot, then you need to learn about cinema's past. Because there have been some performances in films that probably can never be duplicated. Michael Haney, well, you can steal from them too. Leonardo DiCaprio, my attitude is the same as when I started. When I talk to these two guys, it's like we know we were given that one shot and we do not want to disrespect that opportunity, which is why we're just trying the damn best we can to make the best things we can. Because we understand that it is fleeting. Tastes change, culture changes, and I feel very blessed to have gotten that ticket to be able to do movies. So I feel very connected to that 15-year-old kid who got his first movie, and that hasn't changed. Brad Pitt, I feel the same. It's always been about quality. In the beginning, it's wild, and it's loose, and it's fun. You're chasing, you're chasing, you're chasing. And you're seeing what opens. And certainly you're experiencing a lot of doors that close. But you just refine your craft. When I think of myself then and now as far as the approach, it's just a refinement of craft. Becoming a craftsman after a few decades of doing this, it's all in service to story. And along the way, you gain more wisdom and knowledge about story. But as far as an actor's approach of being able to free yourself to see what you discover at the moment in the scene, you can just get there quicker, you know? Listen, the first few years on sets are just trying to block out the 40, 50 people who are standing around, and the lights, and the cables, and the cameras. And it's a very foreign environment. Over time, it becomes a home, and it becomes your community. Michael Haney has another title for us for this next section of the interview, and that title is One Day at a Time. Michael Haney, if you were to give Rick and Cliff advice, what would it be? Leo DiCaprio, stop fucking drinking. Everyone laughs. I watched a whole bunch of old films to prepare for this movie, and somewhere along the line I watched Gun Crazy, box parent, a 1950 film noir, and box parent, and I was like, wow. It was the seminal independent film where people didn't have all the opportunities that Orson Welles would have had at the time with Touch of Evil. And I think about people working with some not huge stars. A director who was pretty damn good but hadn't made anything unbelievable. And with all the chips stacked against them, that combination of ambition got together to make something that was a phenomenal piece of art. And that's what I would tell Rick. There's always a shot. Maybe not quite the opportunities that you had hoped for, but there's always a shot to do something magnificent and to get out of that story that you have in your head that keeps playing like a computer virus, that story that says you've been screwed over by the industry, by society, by the changing of times. You know, I just hate hearing, quote, everything happens for a reason. The universe is watching over you, period, end quote. Laughs. Actually, no. There's no universe watching over, specifically you. What about the rest of the world? It's like this idea that, quote, I have been cursed, period, end quote. That's what I would tell Rick. Okay, now this is Angela, and of course I want to take an aside here. This is my first read. I am a human being in the public who is really a big fan of this movie and of the actors in it and the director and all of the crew. So like any one of us in the public, I have my own thoughts and feelings, and when people read certain things, they're going to stop, and especially if it's something as powerful as what Leo just said, they're going to have their own take on it. And here's my take, and it's just my take. I'm not correcting anybody. It's just my personal reaction. And my personal reaction is that I have met my guardian angel. And I know that not only myself, but everyone specifically is watched over, specifically by God. Actually, yes. And a good way to start that kind of an understanding is right here in good old YouTube. For those of you who are streaming this through YouTube, you can go to stories called stories where people experience death and then coming back. And a lot of those stories tell you that they met angels, and they met people in their family. Tyler Henry, who is a medium, in fact, he is a medium based in Los Angeles. He's had a reality show for a while, and it is called Tyler Perry Hollywood Medium. But it's not hokey. The title sounds like you might go, oh, well, that sounds hokey. It's not hokey because this gift came to him, and he can, when he sits next to someone, if he has their permission, he will channel people that are around them, like their mom, their dad, their, and angels, other people, guides. He actually did one episode where he had his mind analyzed by people who do that sort of thing, scientific researchers who study the mind and the brain. And they did find that his brain lights up in a specific way that is different to the way most people's mind lights up, or, brain lights up when they're thinking or experiencing something. So there's that food for thought for you. And I didn't always feel the way I do now. So I totally understand, that people are on their paths. And Leo might be really pissed off to hear what I say. Might feel like, how dare she contradict what I'm saying? Or he might be really cool with it. I hope he's cool with it. And I definitely have found everything that he has said, including this, in his, because it's sharing his thoughts. Fascinating, thoughtful, candid. And we understand his experience in the film and becoming this character and researching this character. And therefore his experience as an actor. Because if he's done this method that he talks about, surely he's done this in other movies too. And he is in a unique position to tell us, to share with us his experience and how he has seen his view of how Hollywood and the filmmaking industry has changed, what direction it is going in, and if that is in fact a good direction. Is it a good direction? Brad Pitt had some thoughts on that too. I think it is very sad what he said about how most 20-year-olds haven't seen some of the greatest classics like Godfather and movies like that have ever been made, that will never be made again. Certain, eras that will just never return to Hollywood. And God bless Quentin Tarantino for capturing this particular era of Hollywood and the filmmaking industry in this movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And that's everything that I have to say in this particular aside. And thank you for listening to that. And now back to the interview. Quentin Tarantino. But it can all change in a moment. 3 years or 4 years after the movie takes place, think about where Rick could be. The thing is, you get one audition, and now your life is different. I'm always curious when I talk to actors about the one role that started everything. Brad, I remember I asked you, quote, what was it like when you auditioned for Thelma and Louise? End quote. And you said, quote, actually, another guy had the part. End quote. Brad Pitt, 2. The first left to do another film because he got offered a lead, and then the second guy fell out. I think it had something to do with chemistry, but I don't know for sure. Quentin Tarantino, but I am always curious about that. Okay, this moment is going to change your life, but you don't know it. It's just one of 4 auditions you're doing that week. Okay, and here is another aside. was an actress for a brief while in Hollywood myself. I am actually in the editor's version of Assassin. In fact, I have a scene with Charles Bronson. It was a Charles Bronson movie. And this scene also included his wife at the time, Jill Ireland, who was also an actress. And it would turn out, as time went by, we would understand that this was the last film that they did together before her untimely death. And it was a hot summer day in Malibu. There in the Malibu Hills, there is in fact a small little, like a tiny town set up there. I don't know if it was set up by if they created this place themselves or not. I think it's almost like a ghost town, but it's a very small town actually. And it has this building that they were using as a bus terminal, a Greyhound bus terminal. And here it was, a pretty warm day in summer, and we had to put on jackets, sweaters, jackets, scarves, and knit caps and gloves and wait for the train and look as if we were cold. And that was one of my first experiences in a big movie. And the Greyhound would come around the corner and stop as if it were the first time, but it did it several times, of course. And first, Charles Bronson and his wife would board, and they boarded, if you were to walk into the bus, it was on the left side, and with Charles in the window. And then I got given a husband, and we walked in right after Charles Bronson and his wife, and we sat in, we were told, as we were instructed, which was to sit in the seat, the bus seat directly in front of them, and I got window seat. And then it's a picture of like the two people, each window, the person in front, two people in front of me, the person in front of me, all of this through the different bus windows. And then the next window after me is Charles Bronson. So if you ever see the director's uncut version of that, I am the person in the window directly in front of Charles Bronson. And the reason I brought all of this up was to tell you that it was from a director's point of view when Quentin Tarantino says, but I am always curious about that. Okay, this moment is going to change your life, but you don't know it. It's just one of 4 auditions you're doing that week. And I think it might be helpful for Quentin Tarantino or anyone who looks at actors that way to realize that I know when I would go to an audition, I always hoped that and thought. You have to go in thinking, and you really, if you want to know the truth, you have to go in there knowing that you are perfect for this movie. This movie is perfect for you, and this is the one that is going to change your career. Because if you don't go in thinking that, you're going to pretty much get eaten up alive. Because I have gone in, and I went in one time, and I interviewed for Oliver Stone, which, that was huge. You know what it's like? It's like, go to an audition, it's like a date. You're asking yourself, is this person going to change my life? Is there a connection here that I can't find anywhere else? Is there a connection here from this person that they can't find anywhere else? And of course, if the date does not work out, you are devastated each and every time, especially if it is a very special date. And it is true with auditions. Make that word date, auditions, or audition, and it's the same sentences. And it pretty much means something very similar. Um, I honestly think that some actors, when they do get that big break, they know it. Like Leonardo DiCaprio, he knew it. Brad Pitt knew it. Some know it walking in the door. Some don't know it until after the fact, or really probably the majority of them know it once they are involved in the endeavor. Especially if the director or the producer is not a big name. Say it's a first for them too. That was my aside, and now back to the interview. Leonardo DiCaprio. It was hard for me to wrap my head around that concept because I don't think I've done a film where the narrative takes place over just a couple of days. I always look at, quote, where's the beginning, where's the middle, where's the climax, and where's the crescendo, end quote. I think this script was actually a real benefit to us as actors. It freed us up in a lot of ways. I certainly felt it. I think Brad felt that. We were given this incredible backstory. Quentin literally handed us our character's life and we discussed it. And there were some things we agreed with and didn't agree with, but we were given this roadmap of who these guys were. All that character history naturally infused its way into these 2 days in a really organic way. Stuff didn't need to be explained. It was just there in the gestures and therein the relationship. Usually I'm like, quote, let's explain everything about the character, end quote. Quentin's like, comma, quote, no, this is just 2 days. We're going to get glimpses of Rick's condition and what Rick's mentally and emotionally going through, period, end quote. As an actor, you get this sort of weird relaxation from it. And that's the beauty of great filmmaking. Not everything needs to be, as my father says, Irving the explainer. Everyone laughs. It's the audience filling in the gaps that makes this movie, I think, very courageous. But doing a film that's set over only 2-3 days, it is an experiment that I don't think I've ever done before. Looks to Pitt. Have you done it? Quentin Tarantino. Well, Titanic is only a couple of days, right? Leonardo DiCaprio goes silent. Then, true. Michael Haney. I don't remember that movie. What happened? Brad Pitt. Yeah, how does it end? Laughs. Leonardo DiCaprio, box quote, laughs, looks at Haney and Pitt, period, end box quote. I guess you're right. Laughs again. I stand corrected. I guess it is. Michael Haney. Let's talk about expectations around this film. The lights come up at Cannes. What do you want people to think? Brad Pitt. I don't tend to think that way. For me, it's the experience of the film. And when you've had an experience that enriched your life in a way, when you know there's good work on the table, and when you know you're in great hands, then you know it's going to be something that you can get up and feel good about. I'm not being evasive, I'm telling you, that's the reward. Where things land afterward, I think all good films find their place. Leonardo DiCaprio. Brad and I were talking about the anticipation for it. It's a different sense with this one, a different kind of expectation. I heard some of my friends talk about it after they saw the trailer, and they were like, this is exciting because it's a throwback to the type of cinema we've been yearning for. I recently went to a couple of movies, and I don't want to poo poo anybody else's parade, but I saw 7 trailers and they all morphed into one. I felt like I sat for 15 minutes in this intergalactic world of people jumping in and out of different realms of reality and then dragons. There was just this collage of things. I was like, comma quote, was that one trailer or 7? End quote, laughs. Michael Haney. And let's talk about Charles Manson. You have this 3-act movie, but Manson looms over it. Like Chekhov's gun creating this. Quentin Tarantino. One of the things we don't want to try to help you solve here, but what you're poking around about is, yes, this is a Hollywood movie in the same vein as like The Stuntman or Singing in the Rain or any other movie about Hollywood. But there's a good-hearted spirit to it. Then you ask, comma, quote, how does the Manson family fit in? End quote. Well, that's the trick. And that is actually how it is supposed to work. Quote, how does this rancidness figure into everything? Question mark, end quote. And I want the audience asking that question. And I hope that's one of the things that helps lead you to the theater. It's like we've got a perfectly good body and then we take a syringe and inject it with a deadly virus. Michael Haney has a final title for this last portionette, I would call it, of the interview, and it's called Fleeting Moments. Michael Haney. One of the many crazy facts about Manson, he was not an outsider in Hollywood. He crossed paths with many famous people in town, like Brian Wilson, or like Doris Day's son, Terry Melcher, the record producer. You guys have lived in this town a long time. What 6 degrees of weirdness do you have? Leonardo DiCaprio. There's all kinds of weirdness. Jesus. Wow. Brad Pitt. I remember back in the early days, I hung out with Brandon Lee. He drove a hearse and lived in Echo Park. We went out one night and everyone else had peeled off, and we ended up back at his place, and it was like 6 in the morning. A real, drunk and stony night. And he proceeded that night to tell me how he thought he was going to die young, like his dad. And I just chalked it up to, stony 6 a.m. talk. Then he got the crow the next year. Hello, this is Angela, and I have something that I want to tell you. This is a sad aside. I did not know Brandon Lee, but I met him about 4 years before he passed. I'm sure most of you are aware, but maybe some of you are not, which is that Brandon Lee, who was Bruce Lee's son, was making his first big movie, and it was called The Crow. It was a very similar incident to what is going on right now with a movie that was being filmed called Rust, starring Alec Baldwin, where Helen Hutchinson was mistakenly shot by Alec Baldwin. And she did pass on. She is no longer on this earth because of that incident. Brandon Lee, while making The Crow, was also a prop gun was loaded with real bullets, and he was actually shot to death on the set in the scene. So I did not get to know as Brad Pitt did, but I did get to meet Brandon Lee. It was about 4 years before his untimely passing. So the year was 1989, and he was about 24. I was working in a really tall office building on the corner of, in fact, it is the southeast corner of Sunset and Gower. And there is an office there called Queen's Group, and I used to work for them. Queen's Group at the time, its major bread and butter was, it's a printing company, and it's called Queen's Group because its original flagship office was in Queens, New York, and still is, I'm sure. The reason they had a second office in Hollywood is because CDs were exploding at that time. They were a brand new technology, and they specialized in making the covers, printing the color covers, the inserts that go inside the clear plastic boxes for all of the major record companies and studios like Capitol Records and Geffen and Motown and several other studios in the area. I got to go and deliver what they called the proofs for approval to a lot of the studios. It was a pretty glamorous job. I got to see the inside of Capitol Records. In fact, I made a friend there, and I got to go to a concert on the roof of Capitol Records for one of their new bands that they were promoting, which was pretty cool. I also got to meet a lot of the people, men in suits. I didn't know who they were I was meeting exactly, but I know that they were pretty important, and that was at Motown. I'm not going to tell you the artists, but if I could, only if I could, I'd blow your socks off. I met a very good friend of mine, in fact, working there. That was where we met. She was tall, British. She was smart and sweet and highly intelligent and occasionally pretty funny. And we started going to a club at the top of this building that was a blues club. And when it got dark, you could see the entire city, all of Hollywood, from that club. It was great to sit at a table there and have a drink before going home. We would stay just long enough sometimes to see the Hollywood lights come on. We eventually became roommates, and she eventually got a job, and I think she might still be there today, I'm not sure, as the assistant to Henry Winkler at Paramount Studios. For those of you who may not know, Henry Winkler has worked at Paramount Studios for many years now, really shortly after Happy Days. So on this particular day, in fact, I think it was about a couple of weeks before the new girl who ended up being my roommate started working there. This girl had long, curly red hair, a little past her shoulders. She was probably, I'd say, about 25-ish. She had glasses, um, a nice figure. She was pleasant, and I liked her very much. You see, the thing is, she was hired through an agency. In fact, I was hired through an agency. That's how they do it in Hollywood a lot of the time. Unless you come in through an internship or, you're somebody's nephew or niece. A lot of times it's not that way, but a lot of times it is. Well, if you're through an agency, you're usually an actress or a musician, and you're either working in offices through temp agencies or you're a waitress. And that's Hollywood, folks. So this was her last day, and she had put her few things that she had collected there over the couple of weeks in a box. And we all wanted her to stay. We loved her very much, but she had some opportunity in, I don't know if it was a movie or TV or commercial. Probably not a commercial, because that's something you just take a few days off for, but possibly a movie, something like that, that was about to happen for her. So she asked me if I would give her a ride home, and I said sure. And we put her box in my car, a box of stuff, and she threw her coat in the back, and she got in. And then she looked at me and she said, "Oh, by the way, it's about 15 miles away." So I knew in Hollywood traffic at about 5 o'clock, 5:30 as it was around then, that there would be a lot of traffic, and that was a pretty good distance. Usually people, when they work in a town, they tend to live fairly near, but she lived that's kind of far away. But I was in for a penny and a pound, and I said sure. Besides, it was her last day, so I said sure. Hop in, let's go, and we did. So we passed the center of LA, and we passed through LA, and then we started getting into territory that was more kind of ranch-like, flat and barren, not a lot of houses on it, kind of pretty, with mountains, I think mountains way off in the distance. And I didn't know the area, and she said, and I said, "Are we close?" She said, "Yeah." She said, "We're only about a mile away." And then, so when we got there, it was this, like a big ranch house. It was a house, but it looked like originally it had been maybe even a barn. But it was, it was renovated to where it had an upstairs and a downstairs, and it was really cool. I parked, and she said, "Do you want to come in?" And she said, "I live with a bunch of people. Do you want to come in and meet them?" And I said, "Okay, sure." So I parked. I'm usually up for anything. If I like the person, I am pretty much up for anything. So I parked the car, and we went inside, and there were about 7 or 8 people in the living room. All beautiful people, all in their 20s, except for one guy that looked like he was a writer or something. He was probably in his mid-30s, I'd say. And all super nice, all good looking. Clearly they were all actors or something like that, because they were all good looking. So she introduced me to the people in the living room, and they said that this was a really big, sprawling area, and that it used to be a ranch. You come in on the upstairs, but then there's a downstairs below, because that's built, the entrance is built on the higher ground. And then when you go around to the back, that's the lower ground. So the house, that's where the lower story is. And then she said to the guy with glasses, she said, "Can she meet him?" And he looked back at her, and he shrugged his shoulders, and he said, "Yeah, I guess so." And I didn't know who they were talking about. And I said, "Who?" And then one of the other guys that was in the living room says, do you know who Bruce Lee is? And I had heard of Bruce Lee, so I said, I think he's that guy. Isn't he that guy that does the kung fu, karate chops and stuff? Those movies? Nowadays, I would know to call those martial art films, but this was then, and I'm trying to tell you as accurately and exactly what it was that I said on that day at that time. Then another guy in the room came in and said, came over to where we were, and he said, he said, I don't know if you understand who this guy is, he says, but I just want to tell you that he is already a huge star in Hong Kong. And he rides around in limousines, and when he goes to clubs, there's paparazzi and huge crowds, and they're screaming and cheering, and he says, although he does really, that's a life that he's not going to complain about. One of the things that he loves about living here in the States is that nobody knows who he is. He has his life back, he's got anonymity. He can go places and nobody knows who he is. He says he loves that. You see, just because he is Bruce Lee's son, just for that reason alone, he's treated like a big movie star would be treated in America. He's almost like royalty, like Hollywood royalty, but in Hong Kong. So he says he really likes to go out here and just, go places, and he really enjoys that nobody knows who he is. He said he's always wanted to see what that life is like, and it's one of the things he just enjoys so much. And this is one of the reasons he wants to stay here such a long time. And then he said, okay, so now that you know who he is, do you want to meet him? And I said, sure. Oh, he said, okay, then I'm going to go call him. He's downstairs. And not more than about 20 to 30 seconds went by, and he came bounding up the stairs. He was wearing combat boots, like black combat boots, black denim, dark new black denim pants and jeans, and a like a cream colored sweater. And I think he had a gray backpack on his back, because so clearly he was getting ready to go, or he was ready to go somewhere. That's how he was dressed and how he appeared when he walked up the stairs. The person that had been talking to me said, "Hey, Brandon, come over here. There's somebody we want you to meet." And the girl who I had given the ride home to was still standing next to me, and she had a big smile on her face. Everybody was so extremely happy that he was there. It must have been so exciting for them. They must have been meeting, I don't know, stars, or everything was happening, it seemed like, for everybody in that place. And the air was just kind of like electric. It was like when you walk into a concert or a party or someplace where there's just that kind of positive electric, like electric eons in the air or something. It was very exuberating to be there. And so then Brandon walked over towards us, and he extended his hand and smiled a big, beautiful smile at me. He was very handsome, and I could see the resemblance between he and his dad. I realized my hand was extended and he was shaking it, and I smiled back. I was genuinely happy to meet him. Genuinely happy. It just sort of came over me. "Hi," he said. "I'm Brandon Lee." And even his own personal energy was positive, friendly, and welcoming. I said, "It's nice to meet you. I really like your dad." And he said, "Oh." He seemed surprised. And looking back, I think he didn't realize that his roommates were filling everyone in about who he was before he even had a chance to meet them. I kind of felt that. Not that it was a bad thing, it was just a surprising thing. I think he was just as happy with that as the other. He just didn't expect to be informed as to who he was. But he quickly shook that surprise off without ever losing my gaze or ever dropping his smile. He said, "Thank you." And we let go of our handshake. I asked him, "How do you like America?" And he said, "Oh, I love your country. I think I want to stay here for a while." And then, much too suddenly, the man wearing the glasses, the one who was a little older than the rest, broke into our conversation while putting his hand on Brandon's shoulder and said to me in almost a business type of voice, but a little nicer. That's the best way I can describe it. He said, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but Brandon has to leave now for an appointment." Then he said directly to Brandon, "I'm sorry, but we can't be late, Brandon." Brandon looked at me seriously and said, "I'm sorry." I looked back at him and said, "Oh, I understand perfectly. It was lovely to meet you. I hope you enjoy the rest of your time here." He smiled again, this time real big at me like before, and he said, "Thank you." And then the man with the glasses who had taken his hand off of Brandon's shoulder in the meantime, tapped him again on the shoulder. And Brandon looked at me and said, "Well, bye." And then he turned and walked away with the gentleman. And I do remember every single detail of it because I just knew that he was special, that I was meeting somebody very special. And I was. Here's a picture I found of Brandon Lee and what he looked like pretty much to me at the time when I met him, which would have been around 1987. And I believe this picture was taken in Hollywood, California. I can't find the source for this particular photo, but I did find it on Google Images. For the conclusion of this Esquire interview of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood with Quentin Tarantino, Brad Pitt, and Leonardo DiCaprio, just go on over to part 4. See you there.